Yeah, why don't we just get into the episode? Because why not? Why not?
Yeah. Because honestly, why not?
I've got Bravo to watch with my wife. We should get into this. Hey everyone, and welcome back to another pass at Another Pass. I'm Case Aiken, and as always, I am joined by my co-host Sam Alisea.
Hi.
And Sam, I'm going to be honest. I forgot that this episode existed because I kind of forgot this movie existed again.
Yeah, listen, I knew kind of when you brought it up that it existed, but I don't know if I actually saw it. I think maybe I did, but I don't know. And I did watch it for today because I was not sure if I had ever seen it. So I decided to watch it, and I guarantee you that 5 years from now, I will not remember if I watched this movie, even though we have it on tape that I have.
Yeah, no, totally. Because who can really say that Zoolander 2 is a real movie?
No, it is a fever dream set to cash in on nostalgia.
Right, and it's wild. I was thinking about this on my way home when I was like re-listening to the episode. There's a point where I say, and this is not a big spoiler, but I make a comparison between Zoolander 2 and the Phantom Menace in terms of like, oh, well, it's a creative who has like absolute power, having that nostalgic itch like 15 years later and not having any sort of like restrictions on what he can do. And then I like did the math, and I'm like, actually, it's pretty close to 15 years later for the Phantom Menace with Return of the Jedi, and so that's crazy, right?
Yeah, that's a good comparison. Even better than you knew it was.
Yeah. So suffice it to say, we're coming in a little hot about this movie, and we sound great. Before the episode gets into it, like we sound great. We are in Ben and Addy's studio, and I sound particularly good. Like notably so. Like remember how with the Turtles episode it was like, oh, it's weird we're in the same room and I don't sound as good as Addy. Like the three of us all sound fantastic.
Yeah, the sound quality is really good.
We've gotten to the point where I know what I'm kind of doing when it comes to editing. So like things like ums and likes and all that are being taken out a bit more, not perfectly, but like I'm doing something as far as an editing process goes. And I think it overall sounds pretty good. Now, it's a quick episode. Listeners, you are in for a 39-minute blitz talking about this movie. So that's
I'm not even sure if there is a very clear proposal in this one on how to fix the movie. There's so many. It is a blitz. It is 100%. There's so many ideas being thrown at the wall, and really, if any of them stuck, it possibly would have been a better movie. And that's basically how you guys go at it.
Yeah, but that said, it is a Ben and Addy episode, and the three of us have great chemistry. Like, I really miss recording with them on the regular. Like, just for the record, we're all on great terms. Like, we just, they stopped certain point of view, and at the same time, we had a pandemic, and then I had a baby, and so those have made it like hard for us to like meet up in a lot of like context, but like we still interact with each other. We're still friends. For the record, if anyone's like wondering like why we have so many Ben and Addy episodes at the beginning, because this was a spin-off show.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's a Ben and Addy episode, and we joke about how at this point it's like 50-50 Jeff and versus Ben Addy, and really like 40-40, and then like a little 20% sliver of like other people's episodes. So like they're keeping neck and neck those pairings right there. But yeah, it's a good sounding episode, and I think format wise, it's we talk about the movie for a bit. We talk about Zoolander 1 for a bit, and then we get into it, but we propose things that could be changed rather than like a full pitch.
Right.
But yeah, I think people will enjoy because it's like I said, it's quick and we have like a good rapport, and I think everyone here will have a good old time.
Yeah, and honestly, this is the episode Zoolander 2 deserves.
Yeah, so we'll be back in a minute, and see you on the other side.
Welcome to Certain Point of View's Another Pass podcast. Be sure to subscribe, rate, and review on iTunes. Just go to certainpov.com.
Thank you for tuning in to Another Pass podcast. I'm Kay Sagan, and shockingly, I'm joined yet again by Ben and Addy.
Hey!
And today we're talking about Zoolander 2. So this is a fun one. Ben, this was your suggestion.
Yeah.
I actually hadn't seen the movie before we were like brainstorming episode ideas.
That's okay. Addy didn't think he saw the movie.
Yeah, I had seen it and I forgot.
When you mentioned it, I totally had forgotten that the movie came out. Period. Like,
Yeah.
I know.
completely forgot.
Everybody did. It came out at the same weekend as Deadpool, didn't it?
Really?
Yes,
I
it
think
did.
so.
Yes, it did.
Yeah, and Deadpool just
Yes.
wiped the floor with it.
And rightfully so, because
Yeah,
this
'cause
movie
it was-
sucks eggs. It is just awful.
It was at least it was around the same time.
Yeah.
yeah.
Ooh, wow.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I remember seeing the ads for it,
Yeah.
mostly because Justin Bieber dies in one of the ads.
Right.
And I was like, okay, cool. Well, I really like Zoolander 1.
And I like
you
the
know,
idea of Bieber dying, so that sounds good.
These are all good ideas. And then it just came and went, and I just completely forgot that they tried at all. So this was an interesting prospect because it's not one that I had really strong opinions about before I saw the movie today. But I know you have really strong opinions about it.
I do.
So I guess maybe we should rewind a little bit, talk about Zoolander 1 for a second, because I think a lot of people have like good nostalgia for it.
Yeah. It's a very quotable movie.
It's super quotable.
Yeah.
A weird one I was thinking about was that it's one of like the best performances of Will Ferrell's career. And it was
Yes.
like right before he got big.
Yeah.
Like it's like the movie he did right before Old School, which is like that track of like Old School to Anchorman is like where his like presence in movies, because he was getting a lot of good buzz for SNL before that, but like that's where he like became huge.
Right.
And like it was like a really good Ben Stiller comedy, and I feel like everyone kind of went into it thinking, oh, this is going to be dumb, and everyone still talked about it as being a dumb movie, but it was so quotable that you couldn't just help but like laugh and chuckle and think about it and like bring it up a lot. Like,
Right.
It became like one of those like movies in college where you're like, hungover day, I'm going to just like leave a DVD in the DVD player the whole damn day, and I'm not going to have enough energy to get up and change the disc. And that was a good movie for that. Like that, Super Troopers, like there's a bunch of those, like I could watch this movie a bunch of times. It's fine.
Yeah, it's one of my all-time favorite comedies. Like, and that's, I mean, I'm a comedy guy. I love comedy. So Zoolander 1 was a big, like a great movie for me. Like I loved it more than I loved Anchorman, more than I loved Super Troopers, more than I loved like a lot of the other like really highly quotable movies. Like this was my number one film in that genre. So when you get to Zoolander 2, my personal expectations were pretty high, especially since they took 15 years to make it. Like I would have thought they would have put a little more effort into it, to be honest
Yeah,
with
like
you.
I guess I'm curious why your expectations were high and you weren't full of nerves.
Yeah,
Like,
I was a little surprised about that too, because you were actually pretty hype about it up until the 2 weeks before the movie came out, and then all of a sudden, like all your it just disappeared.
Because I will say, once I remembered that the movie existed, I will say I remember the advertising campaign making me a little worried because I saw that Christy Taylor was not in it, or at least not a major part, and I was like, that's weird. She was a big part of the first movie. Like she's actually married to Ben Stiller
Right,
still in real life. Like that's like it's weird that they couldn't get
Odd
her.
choice, right?
Like, I wonder what's going on there. I hope they didn't write her out just so they could have another romantic like love story bit. Apparently. So I was like worried about that before I even saw the movie.
Right.
Like, so I wasn't going in thinking that this was going to be great, especially because you wanted to review this as a movie that is not good and how we could make it better. So
It's not good. It's not good.
There are large swaths of it I would just cut out.
Yeah. Like I said, I saw it today. I didn't hate it. I thought there were some funny bits in there. Will Ferrell, I think, is still fun. It is lazy, is I think my big takeaway. There's a lot of callbacks to the first one, which is kind of fine. I mean, they made it 15 years later, out of nostalgia for the most part. Like the fact that it has like pop culture cachet like made it a viable sequel still. But yeah, they were not trying very hard.
No, and that's my biggest complaint about the movie is when you look at Zoolander 1, and yeah, it's a stupid movie, but it's pretty smart in its biting commentary about the whole like model industry and how like obsessed we are with like this really pretty vapid industry, and just kind of like, you know, really taking shots at that and doing it very well. And everybody can, like, the casting in that movie to me is almost perfect. Like, I mean, it's so good. Like Billy Zane and David Duchovny as the hand model.
Oh, yeah.
Right.
It's genius. Like, I mean, there's
But
you know,
why male models?
and
No, and it's true. Like,
so
I mean,
well
it's so
written.
genius and it's so well written. And that I use that quote all the time when I'm trying to like or point out that someone is clearly not paying attention to stuff. Oh my god, it is such a
But the
good movie.
files are in the computer.
Yeah,
Like, I use that all the time too.
So I will say this: you said that it's taking cracks at fashion and modeling, and I actually think it goes a little bit further.
Yeah.
And that's one of the things
Yeah.
that I like about the first Zoolander movie that this movie doesn't do.
Right.
Which is that I feel that they used like fat or like models as a method of criticizing modernity in general. You know, I feel like it's a lot about how like image conscious pop culture had become, and they were like really addressing all of their concerns about how really the media in general has worked through the lens of this really hyper specific but very like exaggerated example of male models in this world. Because really, who thinks about male models? Period. Like if you're trying to talk about models, usually we're talking about female models. There's a lot of like sexism in the industries. There's all kinds of like weird things going on.
It's like
with
male
that.
porn stars. Nobody talks about them.
Yeah, so it was a weird choice where it's like, oh, yeah, like male models, sure. Like we all know, you know. I think there isn't a whole lot of thought about it, but it's like so you can make that parody, and it worked really well.
Right.
I think this movie didn't go as far out into the world, and it was much more focused on actual fashion, which was a weakness actually.
Right.
Yeah, like
Well, adding the whole spy element to it, and like that just seems that seems like that lazy application of like, well, we don't really have anything to say here, so this is a great way to generate some like sense of mystery and intrigue and action. So let's add this whole element to it. This, you know, the whole whatever secret agency of, you know, for models and everything.
yeah, there were a few times where I was thinking like, wait, is this a spoof of a movie, like
Right.
of a different movie? Like, and I was trying to figure it out, and I think it was just like probably a lot of Ben Stiller's like ideas for different types of scenes from other scripts he had worked on at some point, or like taking a note, being like, oh, this would be cool for an action sequence, and then like mash them all together.
Right.
When they offered him enough money to make a sequel. Like,
Yeah, where he finally couldn't say no anymore. It was just like, fine, I'll throw something together, and threw a bunch of shit against the wall, and this is what stuck. To fix this movie, though, what would you do? Like, where would you take it? Where would you take this story? I thought there were some elements that worked. I liked the death of Matilda. I thought the death of Matilda was actually pretty funny.
It was actually a lot better than I thought it was going to be. I thought I was really opposed to it before I saw the movie. The fact that she appears so much in new material in it is helpful, and obviously it's because she's married to Ben Stiller. But I was happy with the way they handled it. I don't know if I would get rid of her because she was our audience viewpoint character in the first movie,
Right.
And now we're actually using Derek and Hansel as the audience viewpoint for this movie, where they don't know about the new industry that they're like walking into, and so it's being explained to them. But I think we're lacking like an actual person,
Right.
Yeah, and I think that's a huge flaw of it. And they just kind of wanted to go nuts with their idea, and this idea of them becoming old. And so it feels like you're dealing with sort of a standard sitcom idea of like, oh, well, now they're old and they're out of date. How are they going to be relevant? And can, you know, the old school version of what they did still be relevant today? And so, I mean, I think it comes back to having either some point to make or some development on the idea they had from before. You know, I don't think Matilda was so much an issue for me. I would have actually liked them to expand on Megatu. You know,
him coming back in so late in the movie. I feel like the movie spent a lot of time before they actually got to the ultimate movie that they made. I think almost all of the actual plot happens in the last like 45 minutes.
Right.
And they spend about 45 minutes kind of wandering to that point. And I think that's the biggest weakness, that you can feel that they're just throwing out all these references and uses of jokes early on, but none of it feeds into the larger story. So that's part of what's kind of depressing. It's like this doesn't feel like a tight comedy, which I think Zoolander 1 actually was. Like all the weird stuff going on earlier in the movie led into the later scenes,
Right.
And like, or at the very least, like set up reasons for things to be there, or things about the characters. Like this movie had none of that for the first half, and that was depressing. I will say they did a lot of cameo gags in the first half and throughout the whole movie. And I was really happy with the cameo choices. Like, they clearly ramped it up and had people who loved the movie and were like, yeah, I totally want to be in it. I'll make a joke about myself. Okay, cool. That was fun. I would love to keep them doing that. But maybe not start the movie with this whole retcon to explain where they are now, and instead just have Derek and have the school be successful still, and it could happen now. If you want to kill Matilda, it could still happen, just not right after the initial scene, or not literally the day after the epilogue of the first movie,
Right.
So that we could see Derek as a grown-up person who then has all of the life that he's built around himself stripped away, instead of him just being in hiding. Although it was really funny having him say he's going to go be a hermit crab.
Yeah, I mean,
You can still have that line.
Yeah, there's still some
Yeah.
some funny lines in that process. I don't know that I don't. Here's my only problem with that idea is that Zoolander is such a idiot that it's well. I guess if Matilda was still around, somebody could run that school. But I can't really imagine Zoolander being successful at anything other than modeling, because he's such a moron.
Well, and that was kind of the point.
Yeah, that was the point of the first movie. He had certain strengths, and he could be a leader, and he actually knew some things. He could talk about things to fix your skin tone or all that. He was very knowledgeable about his craft.
He was a good Googleizer.
Damn it, you son
Is
of
this
a
just going to
bitch.
be us quoting the first movie the whole time?
Which was what I felt the second movie was trying to do. Which is
Yeah.
my biggest complaint about the movie. It felt like it was written by fans of the
Yeah.
first movie. And they were like, I don't actually know how to write my own comedy, so I'm just going to kind of rip off what
Actually,
happened
that's
in
a
the
good-
first one.
That's a good reference on that, because it feels fanficky.
Yeah.
Which is to say, there's a lot of things about it where they don't understand the arc of the character.
Right.
The first movie, the best point about it was that no one's a fully realized good person in the first movie. Matilda goes into it assuming that models are bad people and doesn't like models inherently.
Right.
So when she is shown that Derek, who is kind of a selfish jerk and dumb, but also not completely a bad guy, he grows, but she grows too, and that's actually why it works so well together.
Right.
Because it's not just that he becomes a better person, but he also reveals the reasons for why he is the way he is in the first movie. No, I don't want to make it too deep, because it's still Zoolander. It's still a silly movie, but that is.
But
what's
there's
going on.
elements of there,
You
yeah,
meet
which
his
makes it
family,
relatable, yeah.
you see why he got into the career he did, what drove his thinking, and also his redeeming qualities. This movie, you just have Derek. You don't have anyone sort of exploring that, because Penelope Cruz's character, whose name doesn't matter.
His character doesn't matter.
Halfway through the movie, I realized that she wasn't just playing Penelope Cruz, and I was like, oh, that's weird that I didn't even realize that.
You mean Penelope Cruz isn't a spy? I just assumed
Well, no,
she
because
really was.
I thought the joke was that she was just undercover.
Oh, gotcha.
As
Yes,
a celebrity.
Yes,
But
celebrity spy like Steven Seagal and Shaq.
Oh god, some Shaq food could have made this movie.
It might have made it a little bit better, maybe.
Yeah. So we never get anything for him to grow on. It's you said it was kind of sitcom-y. It's this is now we want to have the status quo and have it start and end at the status quo, and that is why the movie, I think, is particularly ineffective, because there's none of that happening for anyone in this movie, aside from maybe Derek Jr., but even that's
But Derek Jr. is so uninteresting. There's no reason to care about.
Yeah, and he
that
also
character.
doesn't show up until the second half of the movie.
Right.
So another thing that could have just been at the beginning, like there's a huge chunk of this movie that's just wasted on like popping around the country or the world before finally we get to, okay, now we're in Rome dealing with this fashion story. In that sense, that was what I was thinking. It almost feels like he'd seen Da Vinci Code and was like, let's mess with that.
Right.
But yeah, basically I would say cut out the first half of the movie
and get straight
and
to
just go straight there, and then throw in some of the jokes you like later in and stretch it out. But that's really my big problem with the movie. I think it's very lazy, and as a result, it's so lazy it takes a while just to even get to the story. So the story feels like an afterthought, and then it just doesn't.
Would you keep Mugatu?
Oh yeah, I would make him bigger. I would have him be a threat throughout the movie,
right?
Or at least have him come into play before the third act, like have him come in at the halfway point.
Well, and you can there's I mean, it's funny that I'm gonna say this, but there's actually a rich backstory for him as a guy who made piano ties. I mean,
I know, which none of those things exist in this movie. Like
right.
Those characters had those like deeper stories in the first movie, and it was carried over. And like, I'm not saying I want to learn more about Mugatu,
right.
but like no one in this movie has like this deeper backstory. Like no new characters.
Those little details that made that character work so well.
Yeah.
Like they just kind of like forgot that they needed to do that for these characters.
And as funny as like I thought Kristen Wiig was funny in
oh yeah,
role.
her being this like unable to be understood like weird like affectation.
Yeah.
It was perfect. She was great. And yeah, we could set her up early on as being like secretly working for Mugatu, and then like drop hints early in the movie. But aside from the fact that we all knew that Will Ferrell was coming back for it, there was no reason to be Mugatu was going to be in the movie. Like the first half of the movie doesn't really do anything with that.
Right.
And once he's about to show up, they hit it home very quickly. But like his presence is again like feels like an afterthought. It's like, oh, now we got to get to Mugatu.
Yeah.
Okay, now we'll do this.
Well, what it felt a little bit to me was like, oh crap, Will Ferrell's really expensive. We can really only afford him for half this movie. It's exactly how it felt to me.
But you don't even need to do that many more scenes with him.
You shouldn't.
It's a pacing thing.
Yeah.
All of his stuff happens at the end.
Yeah.
So he could have broken out of prison at the halfway mark, and then like you kept all those scenes, and then you had to like put some filler stuff in between.
Right.
Which you would have to because we're cutting out all the stuff from the beginning.
Right.
Like
to stretch it out a little bit. Yeah. I don't know. Again, this movie just so disappointed me. I would keep Mugatu too. Mugatu, I think, is like critical for a Zoolander movie. Like I don't. As funny as Kristen Wiig's character was, like I didn't love it nearly as much as I loved Mugatu.
Yeah.
Like
definitely.
And I didn't feel like that was like she was interesting in any way. I guess maybe they could have made her interesting by putting in little details like the piano tie story.
I didn't feel like she was that into the first or in the movie period. Like she was around, she would
right.
But again,
it was very unclear what she was doing. Yeah,
doesn't have much of a plot, and
yeah.
so her presence isn't really there. Like it.
It goes back to what you're saying. Nobody really had any fleshed out motivations, or like it seems like nobody bothered to write a backstory for any characters other than like, well, this is what Derek was doing and this is what Hans was doing, you know.
And then we just eventually we got to get him to Italy for a show, and then the movie will start.
Well, like that first fashion show, I think has a lot of the problems of the movie all rolled in one.
Okay.
So when Derek and Hansel first are leaving their hotel rooms to go. Like, wow, everyone. They're like, hey, we're back, guys. I was thinking as they were getting dressed, like, you know, even though the movie came out, or like the first one came out 15 years earlier and they've been out of touch with society, like, men's fashion hasn't changed that much in those 15 years. Like, I didn't think that there was really anything that they wore, even stuff that was very, like, chic at the time that is definitely not chic anymore, was going to be, like, offensively bad today, which is I would say is true.
Well, then you don't know your fashion case.
Well, but then that's the thing. That's the thing. The only areas where it's really changed are at the highest levels of fashion, like the truly trendy components of men's attire. And we do see that when they then go down, but nothing felt that bad or that weird. I mean, they're 15 years older, so some of those outfits flat out would not work on them. Like a modern outfit for like a 20-something male model would not look good on Ben Stiller, like in any capacity, or with any suspension of disbelief. But that I think is the problem, which is that we are still using the lens of the fashion industry to tell the story, but we're not really talking about the fashion industry for real. Like, we're not looking at how things have changed in fashion between then and now, aside from like, oh, hey, phones are big now and they used to be comically small. Okay. Like, that lens could still work, but they don't look at anything from it. They don't look at how like reality television has changed things. They don't look at how being a celebrity has changed completely. Like YouTube, Instagram, all these things. Like, they make a reference to Instagram, like Bieber, like when he dies, like gets a selfie, but that culture is radically different from where Zoolander 1 was, and they never talk about it.
All right.
Like, how interesting would it be if they pulled Zoolander out of retirement to be on like Project Runway? Like, not, and like the indignity of being one of the models on Project Runway and not like even like one of the stars of the show, you know, like that could have been something. Or like, yeah, like we never talk about that, like the modern fashion industry. So we're still using fashion as our lens for the world, but we don't really look at the world. So that element, like the purpose of them being male models, is gone.
Right.
And then they go and they have this, one of the scenes that caught a lot of heat, which is the Benedict Cumberbatch cameo.
Yeah.
So his character, I think the joke they're trying to tell is the joke about the asexuality of models to a certain degree. How we want male models who look like these like non-sexualized men, you know, like or very like prepubescent, and we want women who are, you know, skinny and flat-chested and like essentially looking sort of like almost the exact same. And that's the joke right there, that like we really want to strip sexuality away from fashion. Like, the thing that's on sale isn't how good the person who wears the outfit looks, it's how good the item, like the art piece that we're putting on their person. But it comes off as a bit transphobic, and a lot of people felt that going into the movie, and I do remember there being controversy about that, and I don't think they do anything to really fix that. Like we live in a different time now, and especially if we're talking about an industry that already, the first one dealt with issues of like unfair like representations of the human body and how that, or like that effect on people, and how sexuality plays with it all. Like, I felt they could have done more to justify that scene, or cut it, because like it was only like kind of funny, and it was nice to have Benedict Cumberbatch, but like you knew it was going to draw heat because people care about that stuff, and they care about it a lot more than they did in 2001.
Well, not only do they care, it's okay if they did it, but it didn't have anything to say. It didn't add it. It wasn't smart.
Right.
It was just a throwaway joke, really.
Right. That's why, like, me trying to justify it even is me, like, being like, I think I can reach for what they were getting at.
Right.
But
right, because like you were pointing to in Zoolander 1, there's all sorts of jokes and there's all sorts of commentary about the industry and the world, and how we view ourselves, and how we partake media, and what it means to be fat, or to be pretty, or to be, you know, good looking, and what that all means. And there was none of that in this movie. There was really no thought behind this movie. It was just strung together jokes, some of which were very funny and some of which fall flat. But there was no real thought. There was no purpose in this movie, unlike there was in Zoolander 1. Now, I'm not trying to say like Zoolander 1 was like this super deep, fancy, you know, like brainiac movie that would change the world, but it did have some points to make, which all good comedy does.
Yeah.
All good comedy is trying to make a point, is to get you to see a different viewpoint. And I don't think there was a viewpoint to be seen in this movie.
No.
it's all about providing a certain point of view.
Branding.
Wow, we're really smart.
Yeah, I mean, I think they were doing an uphill battle regardless. Like, I was trying to think before I watched it, like, what successful like comedy sequels have been out there, and I mean, like, especially in the last, like, let's say last 40 years. You know, it's hard to think of like a lot of really good ones. Certainly not ones that are like long series of successes. Like, you've got a few that are like technically sequels, like Airplane 2. You've got ones that are series that are already just parodies of individual movies coming out.
Not to spin this out into another, like, to get into a different movie, but did you think Anchorman 2 was good? Even just with
I was going to get to that one.
Yeah, because I liked Anchorman 2 a lot. I felt it stood on its own fairly well. There were
Had something to
references.
say.
Yeah, like there was a statement about the news industry.
Yes, I thought Anchorman 2 was smarter. I kind of need to rewatch that because I remember watching it and being kind of surprised. It also was a meandering movie.
Yeah.
And that I lost interest a couple of times when I was watching it, and it was just sort of on. So I never really.
It's not as good of a
absorbed it.
movie as the first one, but it stands up just
the first
fine.
one is just so quotable too. I mean,
Right, yeah.
Similarly to
Yeah, but I would say Anchorman 2 is light years ahead of where Zoolander 2 is.
okay.
Yeah, I'd have to look at it again, but I think pop culture though has sort of moved on from Anchorman 2. It was generally people were like, and then moved on. Like
Right.
Zoolander 2, people totally forgot, or
Before
or
it was
left
even in
for-
theaters.
Yeah,
like,
Exactly.
going up
disappeared.
against Deadpool.
Well, yeah, going up against Deadpool is it's the dumbest thing they could have done.
But like, think about it.
who
Like,
would have known, though? Like, come on.
like,
you would have never known.
American
that.
Pie 2, for example, was
Deadpool, though.
a successful comedy. I
Yeah.
thought. Like the rest of the series is bad, but that was a good sequel. I'm really at a loss for like thinking about.
Like what?
3 Men
comedy
and a Baby.
series?
Okay.
Let's see. What else do we got? I can come up with more.
Yeah, I think if you really try,
Romancing the Stone. Had
there was a sequel,
Yeah.
and it was good.
Yeah.
Okay.
I don't know. Like
I'm going back to the 80s, so
Yeah,
I know.
and
So I know
that's
you
the thing,
guys
like-
can't argue with me.
And that's a valid point. And I'm saying, like, if we go back 40 years, like, which takes us to the 70s,
Right.
like, you
The
probably
Godfather.
All right, shut up. We're not getting into an argument of Ken sequels being good. I think there's a lot of times, especially with some of these like actor pairings, where like they can make a series of good movies, and sometimes they might have like a super title that covers all of them. Like I mentioned this to my dad, he was like, the Marx Brothers. I'm like, no, that doesn't count.
That doesn't
like it's
count,
just
no.
they made a bunch of movies. Like,
Yeah.
like they're not in continuity with each other, and we're not talking about the character growth of the dictator.
Right. Right.
Like like you can't say that like Anchorman, for example, is a sequel to Old School, even though it's a lot of shared people. You might be able to make a claim about like Judd Apatow comedies. This is 40 is technically a sequel. But it's a completely side movie from.
Oh, that's right, because
Right,
the
'cause Knocked
characters
Paul Rudd's
from Knocked
character,
Up.
right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
This is the same as one in Knocked
Right.
Up.
Oh, okay.
Although I will say,
I always
while
forget
Which
that.
is funny
I
because
did
Knocked
enjoy
Up is the
that
one
movie.
that I was like, is sort of my movie in the Judd Apatow movies.
at the time I loved it. I can't really feel anything about it
Yeah.
anymore.
Definitely have never wanted to go watch it
40-Year-Old Virgin
Yeah.
is still one of my favorites of his.
40-Year-Old Virgin was like a little too close to home. Like when it came out, I was like, "Oh, there, but the grace of God go I."
Oh, that's hilarious.
Which I think why it was so successful. This is 40. I will say was an enjoyable movie. It's barely a sequel. It's like just by happenstance.
My
in a way
wife
that
and
I
I
enjoy.
love that movie.
It is a movie that has made me want to slit my wrists every time I've watched it, though. Like I saw that I first saw that back to back with Looking for a Friend for the End of the World or whatever,
yeah, I know
which
which one.
I felt was very hopeful. It's a movie about
Yeah, it was surprisingly, yeah.
a meteorite is about to destroy the world.
That was
and
what Steve Carell.
it's
and
Steve
Keira
Carell,
Knightley,
yeah.
right? Yeah.
And like they go off on a road trip, and it was actually kind of fun. And at the end,
Yeah.
I'm like, oh yeah, life is worth living, even if you know it's going to end. This is 40. I was like, I don't have a purpose in this world.
you do
I'm
not.
already like
It's over, baby.
like I'm 32 and I've already wasted all of my purpose.
Yes, you have. It's over. This is it. This is as good as it gets. Yeah, I love This Is 40. I think that's my favorite one of his, just because I am over 40, and it really rings true. It really rings true.
But it's ultimately, I'm just saying, it's hard to make a
It is.
sequel.
It is.
It's really hard to make a comedy sequel that's going to work. Like I'm saying, like, oh, hey, it'd be great to have Matilda around, and I actually would love to have a movie that wasn't like, well, we need to have a main character falling in love story. You know, I wouldn't want them to do it with Hansel because I was much happier with him having his orgy. Like that was actually a really fun detail. I was like, oh, that is Hansel. Yeah. So sure, studios love to do those kind of things, but I would like to see a movie where you can just have a couple be a couple and not have that be the thing going on in the background. Like that doesn't need to be the B
Well, it
plot.
felt like there was like, well, we need to hit all four quadrants, and this was
Right,
so we need
and-
a romance somehow, wedged into this story.
But how much nicer would it be just to have a husband and wife pairing on a movie where in real life they're a husband and wife pairing, and it's just like nice.
It sounds like you need to go back to I Love Lucy for that. Except it's a
I
much
know,
more
right?
abusive relationship.
I know. I mean, it's hard. And I think that they did not give it enough effort because they knew that all the money they were going to make was going to be the same regardless.
Right.
Like the people who were going to go see it were going to be the same people based on a marketing push who were like, oh yeah, like I loved Zoolander 1. I need to see a comedy today. And then that was it. Because
Right.
I think
It didn't even last
we're in a
as long.
post we're in the post DVD sale region. So like the aftermarket is not as profitable as it used to be for movies. So they can't rely on that as much anymore, which is kind of terrifying when you think about the industry. So maybe they just realize like, okay, well at this point now, like Netflix is going to pick it up. They didn't yet, but like someone is going to pick it up for streaming. We'll make our money from the contract to get that. We're not really going to see much money from actual people watching it. So aside from the people who went to see it in theaters, which they knew was going to be a limited number, and that was it. So maybe more effort wouldn't have saved that. I mean, like maybe a more successful movie wasn't going to be more financially successful.
Probably not.
Well, I don't know.
So maybe they understood that and they just
hit
were
the
like,
average-
okay, fuck
the
it, let's just do it.
marketing pretty hard on that, though.
Well, yeah, but that's all just the marketing. Like you just
Yeah.
need to have a couple of funny scenes for trailers. Maybe they just understood like this movie literally doesn't matter. I don't need to do a third draft.
Well, and that's disappointing to me because I have such high respect for Ben Stiller and his career and the comedy that he's written. It's disappointing to me, and I guess I can't really fault him. I don't know that I wouldn't do it myself, but it feels like somebody just handed him a bag of money and he was like, "Well, fuck it, I'll make the stupid movie, whatever. I'm just gonna phone it in because they finally came with a big enough number that I'm gonna do this."
yeah, or he had something that in particular he needed like the money for. Like,
Right. He was like, "Oh, I
How
really."
great would it be if he started an actual center for people who can't read good?
It would be pretty amazing. So that's disappointing to think of it that way, and I don't like to think of it that way. And I like to think that they did try, and I want to blame the studio for getting involved and rewriting it and screwing it up, even though I don't know that that's what happened. But in my own head, that's what happened.
Yeah.
Studio involvement ruined this movie. There, I said it.
Or studio lack of involvement. I mean, this could be one where like really they needed someone who could tell them no.
Maybe.
Yeah,
being
I-
like-
I think I'm a little. I feel like it was more on that end.
Yeah.
Where it was just
a
like
Phantom
there was-
Menace.
But he waited 50. If he's going to be purely masturbatory and just be like, and I'm going to tell all the jokes I wanted to tell, don't you think he would have done it
Well, no,
before
I'm
now?
not
No,
throwing-
this is the Phantom Menace scenario,
Yeah.
right? Like in a nutshell, like was enough time, like knew he could get the money, right? Like primed for nostalgia, like, and then no one could tell him like he could just make the movie he wanted to make with little effort, and everyone would just be enthusiastic about it, being like, "Oh, we're gonna make a ton of money, great, cool," and that's it.
and they just left him alone.
Maybe.
And, not to say that. I mean,
Yeah, I mean-
there's too many factors that could have gone into this.
So
that-
this was directed by Ben Stiller, and the writing credit is a bunch of people, including Stiller, but also John Hamburg, Justin Theroux, and Nick Stoller.
Is that the same writing team from the first one? Do we know?
Let me
Let me
look.
IMDb that real quick.
Yeah, let's find out.
That's what we have this thing called the internet
Interwebs.
webs. The inner nerd webs.
IMDb.com.
Let's go there now.
Huh. Or you could go to certainpov.com.
Where we won't have any of that information for you.
Yeah,
but lots of
you
other
can
great
find another
information.
episode of Another Pass. Queue it up.
First one was directed by Stiller, and it's a writing team of many of the same people. There's
So it's basically the same writing team.
effectively, yeah.
Yeah. That's disappointing to me. It's disappointing to me.
Yeah.
You'd think they'd know better.
I mean, sometimes, like, I think it's. I mean, that's one of the tough things with any, like, writing anything creative, though. Like, sometimes you can have certain ideas in your head that that as a group you think are funny. Like, there could be great inside jokes that we think are funny and that we think everybody else would find funny, and they just aren't. I mean, it's just. Like, I mean, comedy itself, like, we've been talking about the fact that sequels are very hit or miss with comedies, but even the first movie in any comedy series is hit or miss. It's a
Yeah.
tough, it's
Yeah,
a
that's
very
true.
very tough category.
It is, but it's weird. It's odd to me that they were able to hit it so on the nose in the first movie and then miss it so completely in the second.
Well, I think because if you look at Zoolander in the larger grouping of movies that Stiller has written, I think it is unique in that it is really talking about modern culture, and like all the things that Ben Stiller was worried about. I think this movie, like it feels like Ben Stiller is like a little less in touch than he was with the first one. I mean, it's true. He's a bigger star. He's got other things that he's worried about. He's probably not thinking about like YouTube celebrities or how like Netflix is changing the way movie distribution is working. That's probably true. And as a result, he doesn't really have a lot of things to comment on. Like I said, I think if this movie focused on actual issues with the fashion industry, that would be one thing. But I don't think they researched it for the first one either. I think they just went with jokes that they could make about it, kind of relating Hollywood lifestyle with fashion lifestyle, assuming it was probably pretty similar. This movie did not do anything, I think, to move beyond the set of jokes they had. And then they were like, well, and our set, like probably the joke about like what people are wearing was a note was like, and our costumer or set like wardrobe person will have them wearing things that are modern and chic, and they'll be wearing things that look cool 15 years ago. And like, that'll be it. Like, I think they probably just put notes about that other people on the team could then look up without having like a lot of thought into why those jokes were the way they were. Yeah, it's just a lazy movie. Like that's it. Like, everything that would make the movie better would just be like, God damn it, just
put some thought into it.
Yeah, like speed up the plot. You know, don't like have something to say about the industry that you're dealing with, even if it's like super focused on like a specific show, like a fashion show in particular, and the headaches that go into that. Like, sure, it's this weird absurdist comedy, but like it has to rely on some passion, which I just don't think the movie has.
Yeah.
So if I was going to take another pass at this, I would completely shift the action to get it underway faster, and then have it be more focused on things that have impacted their careers as a result of changes.
For sure.
Which is weird that the opening part of the movie has jokes about them getting old and out of touch, but we actually don't really have the crux of the movie has nothing to do with them being out of touch.
Yeah, that's almost a side note.
Yeah, like this could have been like the second half of the movie could have taken place the day after Zoolander 1.
Yeah. Well, so could have the first movie. Like, you know, becoming out of touch, like that could just be a natural progression throughout the movie.
And they don't need to be in exile to do it. They could have just as easily been just celebrities. And that could have been a conversation about Stiller's life as now like a fairly important player in Hollywood who is not on the front lines anymore. Like he's not making a lot of movies anymore, but he's a producer and he's rich. Like, and he's
done well.
Yeah. Like that could be then the commentary of like,
once you make it and you reach a certain level of success.
Zoolander 2 should be about the process of going out and making Zoolander 2, essentially. Yeah. Like it should have been Ben Stiller
still trying to remain relevant.
Yeah, like a meta commentary about like Ben Stiller's own issues with his creative endeavors now that he's like a more established person.
That actually would be fascinating. I'd love to hear his commentary on that. I mean, I think that would have made a much better movie.
Yeah, don't you miss commentary tracks?
Yeah, I do.
Oh, God, I wonder if that... All right, well, I think we have said all we have to say because the problem with this movie is that it was lazy, so the rewrites would be fairly extensive, and it's a comedy, so the jokes actually sort of require the whole structure to be really well put out, and I'm not going to just rewrite a comedy right now for everyone. So we're going to call this
not without a big bag of money.
No, definitely not on a podcast where I just like outline. Here's like my idea about a 90-minute comedy. It's going to be great. It'll hit all 4 quadrants. Bam. Have fun, guys. Go make that movie.
And that's how Zoolander 2 was written.
So next time we're going to be talking about Highlander 2. Oh, and stay scruffy, my Nerf herders.
Thanks for listening to Certain Point of View's Another Pass podcast. Don't miss an episode. Just subscribe and review the show on iTunes. Just go to certainpov.com.
you tired of watching your beloved characters being tortured by careless authors?
Are you sick of feeling like they could have swapped out all of the painful action and the plot would remain untouched? Subscribe to Books That Burn, the fortnightly book review podcast focusing on fictional depictions of trauma.
We assume that the characters' reactions are reasonable and focus on how badly or well they were served by their authors.
Join us for our minor character spotlights, main character discussions, and favorite non-traumatic things in the dark books we love.
Find us on Spotify, iTunes, Google Play, or wherever you get your podcasts.
And we're back. All right. So Sam, we didn't talk about this in the pre-show, but what is your history with the Zoolander franchise? Not just Zoolander 2, which you think you may have seen in theaters, which
Maybe.
sounds like all of us, like, frankly. But yeah, what is your history with Zoolander as a franchise?
I mean, I definitely saw the first Zoolander, and I'm pretty sure I saw that in the theaters. And I enjoyed the first Zoolander. I think most people who were alive during the first one, that was something that was a fun piece of media to consume. It is a movie that is built on dumb, smart humor, where like things are done. Like, they're very dumb people at the center of it, kind of making a slightly intelligent commentary about the world. And there's a lot of wordplay, right? Like, Zoolander himself is really dumb and he can't read very well. And, there's a lot of, like, funny things that he does with that stuff. So a lot of it is just, like, silly comedy. And I think that's great, right? Silly comedies are amazing. And when you do them right, they're fantastic. I do not know if I actually saw this movie in theaters, Zoolander 2, because it was 15 years later, and I just wasn't sure if, that was worth it. I don't, yeah. If I did see it, I probably saw it on TV. I probably saw it, somewhere at home, or trapped in someone's house while they played it on DVD. I don't think I actually paid money to see this, because even though I liked the first movie, I really just felt like this might be a little too late. Nice to have Will Ferrell back. Always fun to see him. Kristen Wiig was nice. This is a deeply strange movie. Which is not all bad. It's not all bad, but it's mostly not good.
Yeah, and this is why it was like a weird one for us to approach in the first place for this one. I stand by the first half of the movie are all just skits that they could have inserted anywhere, and that the back half of the movie is the actual movie in terms of actually having a plot.
Yeah, 100%.
And that sort of is the thesis of like what the actual pitch that we offer in this episode is, that make that the whole movie and just insert those jokes in there as opposed to two separate things. But it's also who the hell cares about Zoolander 2?
Yeah, it is kind of this really like strange idea. Like, let's do this movie again, and it kind of feels, I think Zoolander 1 is such a good completion of itself, right? It is a good standalone film. It does not need any more film at all. It is, there's like a good film should have a beginning, middle, and an end, and the end feels quite satisfying. It feels good. It feels happy. It feels exactly what a silly comedy should feel like. So to bring this back 15 years later and to kind of do this, also it just feels very odd because some of the things are incredibly out of touch. So like this came out 2016, and so there's like this attempt to kind of like call out fat phobia like in the fashion world, but it just is Zoolander being like incredibly insensitive to his fat son, which feels a little weird and stilted. I think you did mention in this in the episode that the movie itself, it feels like Ben Stiller is not quite in touch, right? That's
Yeah.
one of those things. They also make a nod to like the fact that like fashion was like becoming very non-binary, and they have Cumberbatch actually played this non-binary model named All, um, which is just kind of like an interesting thing, right? Kind of like commentary, and I think back in 2016, maybe we weren't thinking about it as much, but the whole thing is kind of icky and kind of transphobic now. There's like a really weird like Zoolander can't wrap his mind around all being both lady and man and being all. Um so there's like there's just some things that feel really dated, and they feel especially dated now on the other side of everything, but I feel like they were definitely out of step even then. Um but yeah, it's like weird moments like that. I think also like using this is so stupid because it's just like in the spirit of the stupidity of the movie, but using the female lead's character, he says, "Grab my breast." They're like they're for buoyancy because she's a swimsuit model. Just really dumb things that I think like in the early 90s, early 2000s, you get away with a lot easier than in 2016.
Yeah.
Probably felt really flat, and like things like that were being called out a lot more by that time. And although those are kind of on pace for things that would happen in like the Austin Power movies and like Zoolander and Mystery Man and all these things, like by 2016, not to say that there aren't raunchy jokes. I mean, that year Deadpool came out, as we know because of the episode, but it just feels like that particular kind of thing just feels very like dated. So there are things like that in the movie that feel dated even from when it came out, and then feels really bad for someone watching it now.
Oh, Jesus. Yeah.
um so I think that's kind of interesting, but overall I think what this movie really suffers from is just and I think you hit the nail on the head when you said this in the you know in the episode itself, is that it just is not saying anything. It's just kind of here because the first Zoolander kind of had a bit of a critique of like fashion and what we put it, how much we put into this world and things like that. And this movie um was just like, let's go down. Remember that movie that we all liked in the 2000s? Let's do that movie and then put lots of cameos in it. And like, don't get me wrong, the cameos were great. They were great and wonderfully placed, but that's basically what this movie was. It was just like it was fine, but not all the jokes land. I still actually still had a couple of chuckles here and there, even watching it now on the other side of 2016.
Yeah, it's not
But
a movie that I was like mad that I watched. It's just not a movie. Like, it's just not a movie that I can easily remember that I watched. So I think
yeah,
it passes some time, but it's just not. It doesn't live up to the previous one. Like the big point I make in the episode that we were kind of talking about is like that the first movie is a discussion about celebrity culture and by way of talking about fashion. Um,
hmm
and it allows it to be kind of galvanized in sort of like funny ways that sort of people can identify as being like, oh, those fashion models, they're so crazy. And then the second one doesn't have really anything new to say about celebrity, and because like Ben Stiller has been kind of like isolated from the common struggles for a while now, he doesn't really have
hmm
anything like new to say about it. And then you get to this movie, and so, well, what can we talk about? And like, well, it doesn't have that heart. It doesn't have that underlying like uh, like self-reflection that the first one does. And as a result, it's
yeah,
just making jokes about fashion that don't really stick because it like I said, it doesn't really have like a bigger point that it's trying to make by way of making those jokes.
Yeah. And I also, there's something that you said in the episode just about killing off his wife.
Yeah.
Um, but I was like, when I was watching it, I was like, I was not a particular fan of it. Like, I understand we get like a new lady in. Penelope Cruz is, she's good, she's funny in it. But it just feels sad to not have the same old gang in, and then also to like teleport your wife in to be like, move on. It was kind of odd. It was like this weird decision made. And again, this movie is a freaking fever dream. There's like they want the end to be such a twist that there's nothing in the beginning that leads you towards the end, and they basically pack the end with all these cameo of all these like fashion designers and fashion tastemakers, including Anna Wintour, to basically get the elixir of life, which is to kill Derek Zoolander's son, because he's got the fountain of youth inside of him, which is just a ruse anyway. It's a red herring. This movie's ridiculous. Like, if you had to like describe the plot to someone, they'd be like, "Wait, what? Why?"
Right. Why is exactly right.
Yeah. So I just think like there's this idea of like, oh, youth. Like, I feel like there's there's like a kernel of something talking about like being a has-been, being someone whose time has passed, right? And there's like a little bit of acknowledgement of that, but they didn't lean into it enough, right? And so like, truth is that they could have gone, and I think you mentioned this too, they could have been so meta with this, right? They could have really like leaned into this idea of like being past and trying to recapture something that is beyond that. And I think if Zoolander had had a speech about like being old and being lame and it's okay and you accept it, and like one of his like crazy speeches at the end, it might have actually saved the movie, because what are these fashion designers doing? They're trying to kill a child to drink its blood so that they can be young forever. And the first fashion scene where all whips Zoolander and his best buddy / rival, his frenemy, is he basically, they call them losers, they call them old, they call them passé, they call them, right? And so like, had we at least had a speech about like, no, it's okay, we can age gracefully, it's okay to let go, it's okay to be a loser, I think it would have saved the movie just slightly, because that's kind of like, there is like a nugget in there about this idea of being out of touch with the new technology, being out of place, not being the hip thing anymore, not being what people are looking to. And I think that would have been a more interesting journey for Ben Stiller, who now 15 years later revisiting something that was a hit for him. But unfortunately, that gets muddled in everything else and the silly, and so we don't really get a real thesis out of that film. And I feel like that there's some of that in there, and if it could have been fleshed out, I think that it still would have been a deeply silly movie, but I think that we would have at least had a message, like a clear message from the film.
Right.
Yeah.
Which this movie unfortunately lacks.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's so frustrating because this movie just fades away completely after watching. I'm staring at the Wikipedia article right now, and I'm like, have I seen this movie before? And I have multiple times, like, for this show.
I love that. Like, But that's the thing. I really, really, truly believe that in a couple of years, I will listen back to this episode and not really remember half of what I'm talking about right now.
Right? That's the insane thing. And the weird part about me watching, or rather, the weird part about me listening to the old episodes with you on this is like, oh, right. Yeah, no, this is a point that I made. What was I thinking then? Like, how was my brain functioning? And sometimes I agree with myself, but like, this is one where like my ability to hold on to the details of this movie just like astound me.
Yeah. It is crazy, especially for like, I will say this for our listeners. Guys, Hayes has a lot of useful and useless knowledge that he stores in his brain at all times. Like, he is definitely someone that if I want to know a fact about something, especially a thing in his wheelhouse, like Beowulf, I can message him at any time and he will be able to tell me the thing. Like, for him to not remember this movie is a very big deal to me and probably to any of his friends because he remembers things.
Right? Like, that's my thing. And this movie is just not. Oy. Yeah, so talking about the episode itself, yeah, like I said, we sound great. We've got great rapport. Those parts are really solid. The structure is like, it feels like it's always going to be a little more informal with Ben and Addie because they're the ones I started the show with. And like versus like with a new guest, it's sort of like, well, I'm super leading the conversation, but
Mhm.
you know, I think back to like the first episode where it took me like it took me like a moment when we started the episode for me to be like, oh right, I'm the host, and they're not, because like I'm so used to like letting them be like a little bit of the point person because normally I had been the guest on their show at this point.
Right.
So, you know, it's like kind of one of those like specific people is like is the vibe kind of thing. You know, like the way
Yeah.
that people act certain ways around certain friends. And very much with Ben and Addie, we just like to riff a lot with each other. And so it was that kind of an episode.
Yeah. I think it's a great episode. And I think, like I said, this is the episode that Zoolander 2 deserves because there's so much coming at you in both the movie and this episode from your riffing that at the end you're like, wow, that was a lot.
Yeah.
Although I will say that this episode was better than the movie.
I mean, that's a low bar. I don't know if I would call this a great episode. I would call this like a perfectly good episode. Great, you know, we sort of would require us to have actually like a really good pitch in there. Whereas in this, like we have some pretty good notes, but you know, it's just not as solidified because the movie itself was already kind of just like a bunch of sketches.
Yeah.
Which does make me recall that we will at some point have to talk about Spice World, which is another movie that is just a bunch of sketches that I'm looking forward for your input on.
Cannot wait.
Man, the show has been going for so long. At one point I mentioned that I'm 32 while we're recording this,
Oh my
which I
gosh.
must have been about to turn 33 because like I can't have been doing this for 8 years now. Can I? Jesus Christ.
Maybe.
Is that how math works? I think
Yeah, that's
think
how
the math actually
that is how math works. Yeah, for sure.
Yep.
Yeah. It's
Math,
okay.
you damn eternal constant.
I think that, like, you know, 2020 has like an asterisk on it, so I don't think it counts. So maybe it's like 7 years.
No, unfortunately, my body is feeling the woes of having crossed over the threshold into his 40s, as we're all aware. But yeah, so yeah, before we started recording, I said I don't know how much we have to say about this because you know I think it was a pretty good episode for the movie that we were talking about. But it's really quick and like it's mostly like, yeah, three guys riff about a movie. Ta-da! Like, you know, like I don't have a ton to say about it. Like it's again, like we don't have like real pitches to like really like throw out there as being like, well, this one was a good pitch and this one was a bad pitch. It was more like that was a these are all perfectly good notes.
Yeah. Honestly,
Yeah.
you could have taken any one of them and made a decent movie. And my thing is, you know, just clean it up at the end. Make it about being out of touch. Make it about being out of touch and accepting that it's okay to be old and out of touch. And that's still cool too.
Yeah.
And then have Zoolander back on the top of the world because he's accepted the position, you know, his life. Let's all age with grace. Just like Case.
Yeah. I mean, because I do want to say, I think Zoolander 2 could have been legitimately good. But I don't think that they came at this movie the way it should have been approached. Like, the first Zoolander is about something. If the second one was, okay, well, 15 years later, we have all these things that we want to think about. Also, we didn't talk about how this, like, we talk about digital distribution a lot in this episode, and it's wild where it's like, this is like 2017, and it's like, oh yeah, like 3 years later, like, all of the streaming stuff did like kill like media, like in a lot of ways. It's wild where we're like talking about it and we're right on the precipice of such a shift in the markets. You know, 'cause
Yeah.
the
No, it's true.
pandemic and all of that. Yeah. So it's fun listening back to this episode, and you know, like I said, we are making good points that should have been approached for this movie. Like the movie that was made could have really like thought about, well, what is the direction that this character could be in, like deal with, like, you know, we talk about like, well, what if it is a faded celebrity, like what is that like, and that's certainly a story that could be told. Like there is stuff that Stiller could have drawn on to make it a more personal movie, and to structure it that way. The way that the first one is a more personal movie when you really get down to it. Like it's all the absurdity of the male model stuff that's being thrown in there. But that's, like I said, just a way of like, you know, shielding Stiller from being like too exposed.
Right.
Because you know, it's not just a biopic. It's like, well, here's like just my reflections on this world that I'm in. And I just, you know, it's the kind of thing where it's like, yeah, it was 15 years later. And he's being nostalgic as opposed to being reflective of his current experience.
Right. Yeah.
You know, and I think that's the difference there. It is a nostalgic movie when it should have been like a reflective movie. And you know, that's why we can't really remember it very well.
Pretty much. We've summed it up nicely.
So on that note, let's get into our notes. So for people who are listening, let's see. I'm going to do chop this all down. So when this episode drops, our last app episode will have been on Thor 2, and then our next app episode will be on the first Michael Bay Transformers movie. So that will be with a new guest. It's my friend Tom, who is a very knowledgeable nerd, and will be an interesting conversation. It's a quick episode. I remember we ended up being like on some very big tangents when we talked, because we're friends from high school, and those tangents were like, this is too far for the episode. And at the time I was like more sensitive about like the runtime of the episodes.
Right.
Or rather had in my mind that the episodes could be like 20 something minutes. So what is this? It's a pretty short episode. Let me see what the runtime on this one is. It's 27 minutes. So this might be the shortest episode of the show.
Well, that will be incredibly interesting then.
Yeah. So it's a fun episode. So, and meanwhile, in terms of the current or of the main show, the last episode that dropped as of us, hang on, I need to actually do math. Let me, because we're recording ahead and not just the immediate next. So the last episode as of now, as for the main show, when this episode drops, the last episode will be A Dirty Shame, where we had Wes Johnson, who was in the movie, as our guest for that one, which was a lot of fun. He's a talented voice actor and a cool guy, and did a ton of voices while doing the episode. So that was a good one. And then next, we're looking at The Grudge, which we've got Ben Hassler from Reels of Justice. I keep saying Hassler, it's Hasslar. But from the Reels of Justice podcast, which is a really fun show that I've been on 3 times now and won all 3 goddamn court cases talking about movies.
That's my co-host. That's my co-host.
It is a show where you go into a fictional court to either prosecute or defend a movie as being a bad movie. And I have won 3 times, including for Alien Goddamn 3.
That's honestly, they actually should mail you a medal or something, or a trophy or something, because that's insane. That's an insane stat, especially for Alien 3.
That case is regularly cited on that show now. It is the Beowulf defense. They have cited it multiple times when trying to make a case for why a movie that most people would agree is a bad movie isn't technically bad. Yeah, so that's a great one. Yeah, so I hope everyone checks those out. And then if people want to get in touch with us, Sam, where can they find you, follow you, contact you?
Well, you can find me here, of course, every time we drop an episode. And sometimes I remember the Discord exists, and so you can find me there. But if not, I will be very busy practicing my model face in a mirror repeatedly until I get it right and can achieve blue steel. And until then, if there's anything that I said or didn't say this episode that you wish I had said, you can let Case know at...
Well, you can find me on most platforms at Case Aiken, except for Instagram, where I am still going by my high school AIM screen name, and there I am going by Quetzalcoatl 5 because I was pretentious in high school and didn't really care if people could spell it because I was dumb. Anyway, so yeah, you can find me Instagram there. You can find me also on our Discord server, which I don't forget exists, unlike this movie today. You can find more episodes of things that I work on at Men of Steel, which is a great podcast that I co-host with Jay Mike Volson about Superman and Superman adjacent stuff. You can find videos I work on the Certain Point of View YouTube channel, which is Certain POV Media. You can find video episodes of this show, Men of Steel, and you can find my Superman analog videos there. You can also find me on Ko-fi if you want to chip in and support the production of all this stuff. That's Ko-fi, that's ko-fi.com/Case Aiken. And I've got one patron on that, which is Micah McCaw, who is a former guest of the show and just a rad dude. So want to give that a shout out because he deserves a shout out for these goddamn things. Anyway, yeah, so come back for more episodes. This is a fun show. I've been doing this for apparently 8 years now. Jesus Christ. But yeah, and until then, I was about to say stay scruffy, but that's not the thing I'm supposed to say. Pass it on.
All right, Josue, let's go through our new Comic Day stack. We have a lot to review.
I know. Maybe we've gone too far.
Well, let's see. Marvel, of course. DC.
I got Image, Dark Horse,
Black Mask, Boom, IDW.
Aftershock, Vault, of course, Mad Cave.
Oni, Valiant, Scout.
Magma, Behemoth.
Wow, that's a lot. Well, all we need now is a name for our show. We need a name for our show about reviewing comic books every week. Something clever, but not too clever.
Like a pun? It's kind of cheesy.
Yeah, it's something that seems funny at first, but we might regret later on as an impulsive decision a few dozen episodes in.
Yeah, we'll think of something.
Join Keith and Josue for We Have Issues, a weekly show reviewing almost every new comic released each week. Available on Geek Elite Media and wherever you listen to your podcasts.
Scruffy nerd herders.
It's nerf herders. Jesus Christ.
Stay scruffy, Sam nerf herders.
CPOV. CertainPOV.com.